start. I want to see what the
Oh,
coverage.
it's too late. We are live.
Hey, what's up, guys?
What's up? Jason and John here coming at you today with something super cool. A DAO to rank DAOs through quadratic voting. Let me share my screen and maybe this will make a bit more sense. But essentially what we're going to talk through is this Gitcoin bounty issue, which we got on, which talks about polishing, testing, and deploying a quadratic voting DAO. And yeah, I'm actually just going to leave this description up for a second, and you guys can actually go ahead and read this if you're not familiar with it. And while you do that, Jason, what was I going to talk to you about? Go ahead and read this. If you haven't met me and Jason, we are Solidity engineers, or
among other things.
Among other things, but we enjoy like thinking through and designing interesting systems. So we're going to talk a lot about what we think are really cool mechanisms to make a system like this work well. What are cool incentives? How do we keep it safe? But yeah, essentially, quadratic voting, I think, is something which a lot of you might be familiar with already, quadratic voting. But if not, I should actually go into my drive and show you that little presentation I made. But no, let's leave that out. But essentially, the challenge description is creating something called DemocracyDAOv, and they want to use quadratic voting to make it work. So let me actually read this bounty here, where the emergent property of quadratic voting will help create a better governance mechanism for DAOs in general. At Democracy Earth, we are aiming to implement a quadratic voting compatible Moloch DAO to get the Ethereum community to rank every DAO in the ecosystem. So here's our big goal, right? How do we get the Ethereum community to rank every DAO in the ecosystem? A DAO of DAOs. That is basically what we are trying to build, right?
Yeah.
And I think the first thing we're going to argue, Jason, here is we actually not going to use the Moloch DAO design, which is a super cool DAO design. But if you go to, let's for example look at the Moloch DAO. We'll just look at someone else who submitted work on it. The Moloch DAO is very cool, but it allows for proposals to basically receive a whole bunch of funds. But in this case, our goal is, remember, for let's just go back to it, the Ethereum community to rank DAOs in the ecosystem. It's not really for DAOs to receive funding in any type of way, and we sort of want to abstract away from that complexity. If that makes sense. I think it does make sense. So you'll see some of the issues we find with Moloch DAO is, looping through all of the candidates to see who's the highest number of votes. For those of you who don't know, when you loop through a list of things, it's quite a dangerous operation. Jason, maybe you want to talk a bit about this. This is quite actually an interesting topic that you've done a lot of work on before.
Yeah. So basically, when the amount of computation you do depends on the input, you can run into problems. Basically, you can have various types of denial of service. So let's say Ethereum can at maximum run a for loop for 1,000 times. A user will find a way to run it 1,001 times, and your code will break. So that's the first reason it's bad. Like, really, people can break your code if they can manipulate that. The second thing is, it's really expensive to run computation on Ethereum. So if you're running for loops, definitely you're doing something wrong and you need to rethink your design. Just a quick shout out, you can watch a really cool presentation that we did last night on how Wildcards approaches this, and we're really proud that Wildcards has 0 for loops in any of its code. So That's
sick. I'm gonna put that in the comments actually just now. So let me go to Telegram and find that. I think that'll be good to do some housekeeping and put that in. And that's because we have Harbinger tax contracts that obviously need to be scalable, and yeah, we don't want to loop through a bunch of things. Let me grab that. Where's this link, Jason?
Yeah. So another thing that I guess is quite sort of interesting with our like this challenge is that it uses quadratic voting. So the original contracts use normal coin vote. So $1 one vote, whereas what we're trying to implement is quadratic voting, where $1 is one vote, but $2 is only the square root of 2 votes, and $4 is 2 votes, and $9 is 3 votes, etc. There's actually quite an elegant way to do that voting on chain, where you actually do the computation of the square root off chain, and you submit that value to the chain. John, have we lost you? I'm not sure if this is my internet or John's internet.
No, my bad. I just noobed out. I pressed the button and I completely just destroyed half of our broadcast. Sorry. I'm trying to figure out how to get the link to this YouTube so that we can share it for people who are interested.
We can share it afterwards in the description of the video. Cool. So I just explained basically how quadratic voting is. So one thing that you don't want to do on chain, just listen to this, is calculate the square roots of a number on chain. Doing that is firstly unpredictable because you use I think it's called the Newton-Raphson method. And that has a loop, and that loop can go many times, and it's quite unpredictable. So some attacker could find one value that causes your loop to run 1 million times when your contract can only run 999,999. So really, I think maybe that's one of the big improvements that we've done, which is so simple but very important.
Yeah, and we'll talk about how we do that now. It's actually such a simple solution, but it avoids all of this complexity, which you basically don't want to be doing on chain. It's completely not called for. But anyway, so these are basically just a couple reasons, but that's why we thought we would design actually an entirely different system, which we're quite excited to walk you through. As I said, the Moloch system is great, but we thought it's probably not the best fit for sort of the goal that we understand of getting the Ethereum community to rank every DAO in the ecosystem. Another big thing you're going to talk about, hey Jason, is incentivization. How would you actually incentivize a community to participate in this as well? And we find that that Moloch structure doesn't really have the incentives we need to actually kickstart the whole community.
For sure. Another thing worth mentioning is this isn't the first quadratic voting DAO we've built. About a month ago, we built another quadratic voting DAO in the ETH Turin hackathon, which was an online hackathon that was supposed to be hosted in Italy. And
we can find it.
Yeah. We actually merged code from two old projects and thought of a brand new mechanism that's really exciting. So in wildcards, the voting is very simple. Every month, one of our partner organizations wins all of the funds raised by Glenn the Dragon. And that's it. You vote with loyalty tokens, which are generated when you participate and hold wildcards in the system.
And one interesting...
that's, I guess, the only real similarity. Sorry?
Yeah, I was going to say one interesting thing we should quickly note is, while we're here, is so quadratic voting, as Jason said, if you have 10 voice credits or 9 voice credits that you vote with, that counts as 3 votes. So it's quadratic in that sense. And you have to prevent against Sybil attacks, which is basically someone who, instead of coming in and voting with their 9 voice credits, which counts as 3 votes, creating 9 identities and voting, with 1 voice credit, with 1 vote power at each point in time, if that makes sense. So you have to, whenever you build a quadratic system, very much design against that. And in the wildcard scenario, we designed against that by only actual holders of wildcards are able to participate in the vote, if that makes sense. So that was quite one of the easier ways to design against it in our case.
John, I'm going to quickly ask my family to stop using the internet.
The internet.
I can hardly hear you.
Go for it. Okay. Okay, while Jason does that, I'm actually going to quickly just very briefly talk about quadratic voting. I'll just quickly say, over here you can see that essentially quadratic voting allows people to express the relative strength of their preferences in a democratic process, right? So we have this democratic process of the Ethereum community ranking every DAO in the ecosystem, and we want people to express the relative strength of their preference or feel in this ranking. And if you have 100 voice credits, this is how your votes will actually be calculated along this y is equal to root x function, which is crazy, right? How cool is that? So let's get back to it, and let's maybe now start talking about our system and how we're going to create a DAO that ranks DAOs. Let's do it. And let me get to the GitHub repo so we can.
Yeah. So the README on that repo has a lot of good details. Let's
chuck it in the comments here.
It would be valuable to read through that slowly and in detail.
Yeah. It talks a lot about, okay, why don't we use the Moloch DAO? I think one of the first design decisions let's quickly talk about is the fact that we split the logic into 2 contracts. And this will become very apparent, but essentially we have one contract that holds all the money. It's managing all the funds. And that's a contract you want to be very secure. You want to have a lot of guarantees on it. You don't want anyone to be able to steal any money. And that's why that contract's non-upgradable. And then Jason, maybe you want to talk about the other contract quick.
Yeah, so the other contract handles the voting logic, and it does not handle the deposits. So if someone is able to, get the upgrade keys and put malicious code into the voting contract, I mean, in that very edge case scenario, all the user funds are still safe, which is really great. It cannot do anything to user funds. The person who deposited the funds is the person who can withdraw the funds. And that's great because no one knows what challenges or use cases people will think of in the future, or what type of integrations will be useful for this. So in my opinion, this is not just for this DAO, but in general in Ethereum. You want upgradability, because if you want a protocol to last forever and to continually improve and get better and adapt to the needs of its users, it has to change over time. So in my personal opinion, what you want is a good governance system and a mechanism for upgrades, but the upgrades themselves are good. What's bad is when the upgrade process is too centralized, or the team has misaligned incentives, etc. So, really a cool thing. We're using Open Zeppelin, Zeppelin OS, which is an SDK for building upgradable smart contracts, and it's really well engineered and easy to implement.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll actually just quickly, while we're on it, the one contract's called our sort of no loss DAO, and that handles all the voting aspects. And as you can see, this contract is upgradable. Whereas
Could you zoom in a few times?
Let's zoom in. I might take our faces off of this as well. Then I think it will make the text bigger. Sweet. Oh, there we go. So essentially, if we look over here, we have two contracts, and I'm just going to bring up pool deposits. Our pool deposits contract is non-upgradable. It handles all the logic of people putting money in, people taking money out, people getting paid. And yeah, the no loss DAO handles all the voting and all of that type of stuff. And as Jason said, you want your system to be able to evolve and, think of new mechanisms, and that's where the upgradability is really sort of important in our minds, at least.
Yeah.
Sure. So I think that's a cool part. Point number 2. I think one other thing to note is we actually did use this design pattern of splitting it up before in a project called DAOcare, and we've had the contracts audited. So a lot of the code actually leverages off that, which has already been audited, which gives us quite good confidence in what we've built so far. But I guess that's something you can check out here. Come onto the repo, have a look at that. Point 3, Jason, I think this is so crucial, and this is another point of how, as times change, you want things to change. As I think Moloch is right now in the V1, when you put your ETH or wrapped ETH into the system, all the funds in the DAO are just sort of standing stagnant, and they're not working for everyone. And I think a big thing we wanted to do was be able to use the DAO funds instead of just sitting and doing nothing. We wanted to actually passively lend out those funds to generate returns and incentivize certain, participation behavior, which is like a really important thing in our minds. So you can see point 3. Yeah, we're using DAI, and we talk about it more now, but we're using Aave platform to lock away the DAI and earn interest.
So I think, people say this is the year of the DAO and whatever, but to be honest, we haven't really seen the participation that people that we had required to make those sort of claims, and having incentives aligned with the users where participating correctly in the DAO actually benefits you more than not is extremely powerful. And I think very few DAOs have gotten this right. So I hope this experiment of ours has an influence.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's going to be super interesting. I think maybe the next thing we'll talk about is, this is quite a complex one, but should we jump in a little bit to getting cyber attacks right in our system? Should we dive straight into the code? Do you think that might be the best way to take a look at it?
I think let's do a high level before we go into the code. We can describe it waving our hands.
Yeah.
Firstly, a civil attack or cyber attack, whoever, you can pronounce it how you want, is an attack where a single entity creates multiple fake identities in the system. And on Ethereum, for example, it's extremely easy to create new Ethereum addresses and wallets. And if a system depends on unique identities participating, to be fair, that's very dangerous. And for quadratic voting in particular, it's not one man, one vote. It's also not one coin, one vote. It's kind of a mix where you need one man, one vote. So you need the uniqueness of each person. And then the amount that they vote with changes how many votes they get. So you can see there, if they vote with 4 voice credits, they only get 2 votes. So someone who has 4 voice credits can say, cool, I'll make four different Ethereum addresses and get 4 votes instead of just 2. And that's a dangerous attack that we need to protect against. So how do we do that? What's the first thought that we tried? John?
So the first thought is, and again, this is a multi-layered attack or a multi-layered solution, because I would surmise that not anyone has really figured this out completely. Like, I haven't seen an absolute watertight solution. Otherwise, we'd probably just be using it in our contracts. But our first way is through sort of economics, I would say, to actually make it infeasible to have a cyber attack. So you have something like a minimum deposit threshold, right? And this is something that's not unique. This isn't something that we actually thought of ourselves, this one, although there's some other mechanisms we have. But this one is, say, to join the DAO, the DAO ranking DAOs, you need to have a minimum of 500 DAI just to join, and all DAI that's deposited in excess of that threshold, that's used as your voice credits, right? So, a normal Cybele, if you have 10 DAI and each DAI is a voice credit, you would just split that 10 DAI over 10 accounts to game it. But in this point in time, if you have this minimum threshold, you require so much stake for your vote to only start counting. For you then to try split that up and create another account, you have to pass that whole initial threshold where all of that initial capital doesn't count towards any voting power. That makes it a lot less feasible for someone to spin up a lot of Cybeles, essentially. I don't know if that makes sense. Jason, anything to add there?
No, that sums it up really well. So basically, it's very expensive to attack the system. We've got another more subtle method that we're going to talk about. And also, it's worth noting, once again, our contracts are upgradable. So, in the future, we want to come up with new ways of having DAO membership. That was out of scope for this iteration. But we could have a mechanism where there's some kind of whitelist, and votes are only counted if someone is a member of the DAO.
Yeah, no, that's super. It's super exciting. There comes a point where if someone, say, has 10,000 DAI, instead of making just one account, maybe they would make 2. But we have other methods to safeguard against that, as I said, which we'll get into now. The next parts we should talk about, maybe quickly high level before we jump in, Jason. I'm just thinking is the whole system of iterations. So something that's so important, if we go back to the design goal, the Ethereum community needs to rank every DAO in the ecosystem. Now, a ranking is not static. As we've talked about, as time goes past, life evolves, things change. That's why we wanted upgradability, because we want to introduce new cool systems. Just like that, the ranking now shouldn't necessarily be the same in 6 months' time, right? This is constantly going to evolve. There's going to be new DAOs. Some DAOs are going to lose popularity. Some are going to evolve. How do you make it such that people don't just vote? And already, since voter participation is so terrible in DAOs, people are inclined to maybe just set it and forget it, is what they call it. So you need some sort of system of vote decay that essentially ensures that the rankings are fresh and people are actively voting and making sure that this ranking, at least every so often, is sort of realigned or updated. And in that way, we've designed the system such that the rankings are sort of have a hard refresh where they really updated every 3 months, so quarterly throughout the year. This is configurable. Maybe every 4 months is better. It happens 3 times a year. Maybe twice a year. Maybe every month. That's something we're not sure of yet. But we have this system of iterations, and this iteration for this ranking will last 3 months. And at the end of that iteration, the rankings will be wiped clean and all of the voting in the system will start again. And it's about finding that balance. You don't want people to have to do it too often, but you also want the rankings to stay fresh in a sense. So I think we surmise that maybe 3 months is a good iteration interval.
I guess a little bit more on the iterations. Firstly, it makes it so much easier to think about this system. It makes it easier for us to explain it to you because they're iterations. It makes it easier for us to code it. And I think, for people who are hoping to get better at writing smart contracts and Solidity, it in general is very useful to turn a sort of continuous or sort of large problem into smaller chunks. Dealing with discrete things is almost always easier. So that's basically all we're doing here. It's easier to code. It's easier to reason about. There'll be less bugs. The whole system kind of clicks together.
Yeah, no, totally. And I mean, another nice thing about the iteration is it provides a breakpoint where at the end of every iteration you can have your incentive mechanisms kick place or something. Everyone knows at the end of the 3 months, based on what happens in the system, there's going to be a payout, things are going to adjust to equilibrium, the rankings are going to be reset. Yeah, it's just like a nice system. Should we go into it, Jason?
Yeah, let's go into it.
Let me make this a bit bigger.
We can actually learn a lot just going through those variables at the top. So
we go through the deposits one first.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so that value there, total deposited DAI, that is extremely important. We have to keep track of that at all times. The reason we need to keep track of that is we use it to calculate how much interest we've earned. So remember, we take the DAI that uses deposit and we put that into Aave, which is a lending protocol on top of Ethereum, amongst other things. But the sort of long and short of it is that when you put your DAI in Aave, people are able to make use of your DAI and they pay fees when they use it, and those fees go to you. So that's how you earn interest. This smart contract collects all that interest and uses that interest to incentivize user behavior. And it does that basically by subtracting how much ADAI they have, which is the token that you get when you deposit into Aave. And you subtract the total that was deposited, and out you get how much interest you've earned. Totally.
So if I can just quickly summarize that, essentially what it means is if we have 1,000, this is basically how much money is in our DAO. If there's 10,000 DAI in our DAO, all of that DAI as it comes into the DAO is converted into ADAI, the interest-bearing token. And say at the end of the iteration, we now have 11,000 ADAI, but we had 10,000 DAI deposited in the contract. We know that 1,000 ADAI can be redeemed, and all of that is interest earned by the DAO, and that interest can then be used to incentivize participant behavior, while at the same time it remains a no-loss DAO in the fact that no one will ever lose their initial stake they put in the DAO. If you put 100 DAI in, you can always get that 100 DAI out, essentially. And that's where this mapping is super important. It checks, for every person who's put money in for their address, how much DAI did they deposit. So they'll always be able to get that back out. The next thing, Jason, let's talk about is the proposal amount. And this is essentially to stop spamming of proposals. But a proposal is actually just another word for a DAO. So this is an Ethereum community. Remember, over here, we are an Ethereum community to rank every DAOs in the ecosystem. And a proposal is just someone saying, here's a DAO, we want to rank it, put it in the ecosystem. And, you know, in order for someone to just put in a DAO, we essentially want them to stake a bit of DAI. At the moment, this could be 50 DAI or 100 DAI, but this is just to say, you know, what you're putting in, you believe. You can, if you withdraw that proposal or that DAO at any point in time, you can get that DAI back, but we want some sort of minimum buy-in. And this is another thing where at the moment it's public. Anyone can submit a DAO, but we actually have a whitelist mechanism, and there is scope for the administrator being able to actually blacklist or whitelist certain DAOs if they feel that that is a feature that they think aligns with their values, essentially, or something that might be useful in the beginning.
Yeah, and also remember that the more projects submit proposals, so the more DAOs that are in this DAO, the more interest that's earned, and the more incentive people have to participate and earn that interest, which is really cool. So this DAO benefits the projects that are in it because they get ranked and they get visibility and people see them. But this DAO benefits also because more people want to participate so they can redeem that interest. So the whole thing kind of grows by itself, which is a good property to have for a system.
Very cool. And then, yeah, like I love that feedback loop. And the next variable, DAO membership minimum, that just basically speaks to the cyber defense mechanism where you have to put in at least, let's say, 500 DAI to join the pool, and only after that 500 DAI does your voting credit start to accumulate. So if you put in 700 DAI and the minimum is 500, then you'll have 200 credits. And that's also configurable in something that I think I'm not sure. I don't think Jason is either of maybe what that value should be at this point in time. And it would be good to chat more about it. But I think that will also be good to discuss that when we talk about the other cyber defense mechanisms later, because that might influence that value. Very quickly, these are the interfaces for the Aave lending pool, etc. For Aave, there's a bunch of things we need to do to lend the money out. That's not that important in terms of what we're going to be talking about. Just know that when the DAI comes in, we lend it out to start earning interest. As we said, it incentivizes behavior. The emergency module, I don't think I'm going to spend too much time on this, but this is super cool. So I'll give it a quick talk, and then Jason, it'll be cool to get your opinion. But basically, we have these two contracts, and the second one is upgradable here. And you'll see with our deposit and withdraw function in our pool deposits over here, someone, in order to not game the system, once someone is voted in an iteration, they cannot withdraw their amount from the DAO until that iteration is ended. And that stops people double voting on the same DAI, essentially. So that stops someone from putting in DAI, setting a vote, pulling out the DAI, giving it to someone else, them voting. Of course, there's some ways to defend it, but this is really the simplest and best way. And since our second contract over here is upgradable, if the person who had the upgrade keys was malicious, they could write logic that could perhaps, try make it such that it's impossible for this pool deposits contract, since this contract calls the upgradable contract, to withdraw cash. And this emergency module just creates certain guarantees that such that if you put money into this DAO, even if the person who's the admin who owns the upgradable DAO voting contract, even if they hack it, they will never be able to get your funds. You can activate this emergency module through the consensus of people in the DAO. And from that, it will basically, I want to say, sort of destroy the smart contract. The system will cease to exist, but everyone can pull their money out. So it's the ultimate sort of peace of mind. And if you're interested in how we built that module, check it out. It's got quite interesting trade-offs and logic, and how big does the DAO have to be for the emergency to be able to be allowed to kick in, and it prevents against flash loans, because in theory someone could join the DAO with a massive amount of cash, quickly vote that the thing should be an emergency, call the trigger, make the whole sort of smart contract broken, and then pull the money out and repay the flash loans. So we have other guarantees, like you can only vote for emergency after a certain amount of days. So it's got lots of thinking to defend against things such as flash loans and stuff like that, which is interesting. But let me not go more into it now. But it's pretty cool. I like it. So there's a whole bunch of modifiers that it uses and events and stuff. These are the modifiers. Yeah, Jason, maybe you want to talk more about it.
Yeah, I guess I don't really want to delay the process, but really it's kind of, we have it there in the worst case scenario. But the thing that we have to be careful of is that it's not easy to activate that if there isn't a worst case scenario. And
Exactly.
We want to make sure it's easy enough to activate that in the worst case scenario, it's almost guaranteed to get enacted. So that balance is actually quite tough.
Yeah, very tough. So come look through our code if you want.
We've kind of mostly got the perfect
Best
solution here.
So yeah, as I said, this whole emergency module is also actually part of DAO Care, which passed a contract audit. So a couple of people have given it a look and thought, and it is pretty well thought out. And yeah. Okay, so here's setting up the contract. A couple things that are configurable, which are worth checking out, are the proposal amount, as we said, how much a DAO has to stake to be in for the voting. The DAO membership minimum, that's another interesting thing. Okay, so this is something we'll get to, which is super interesting. Otherwise, basically, the deposit withdraw, it does what it does. It takes your cash, it puts it into Aave, it takes note of when you've joined. So another thing that works in the iterations is you can't vote if you join the DAO, you're only eligible to vote in the following iteration. And that stops the user because remember, a user can't withdraw their funds once they've voted till the end of that iteration. So this stops someone from coming in at, the 11th hour and 59th minute, coming in with a large stake, quickly voting that this DAO is really great to change the rankings, and then 2 seconds later when the iteration has ended, now removing all their cash from the DAO, because then they haven't really had any stake in the system, and it's unfair that they've had such a big vote or say in the system, right? So
I think
in this way,
John, let's go to the README. Yeah. There's a few very brief bullet points. Near the bottom. There we go. Summary of DAO rules.
That's smart. Awesome. Yeah.
So if you could just zoom in a tiny bit, it's a little bit pixelated. Cool. So yeah, you cannot vote in the iteration that you join. The reason for this is that we need time to pass to ensure that the Sybil attack mechanism is working correctly. The other thing is it's also unfair if you get the payout of interest because you voted, even though you didn't contribute to that interest. So when over time, when your deposits inside this DAO, you keep on contributing to that interest, right? So it's really important that that can't be gamed. Maybe onto the second point, you cannot withdraw in the same iteration that you vote. It's very similar. We don't want people coming in and going out with their deposit. That can really cause problems. So this also means if you vote, you're actually committing all of that deposit to generate interest to help the DAO. And that's really important for our incentive mechanism. John, I don't know if you want to go through the next ones.
Yeah. I'll quickly do it. So essentially, you cannot change your vote. I mean, this is how it is for now. I mean, already voting is such a, arduous process. Often, people won't be inclined to do it twice or anything anyways. This can change, but for simplicity, you can't change it for now. And this goes on the same thing if you can't vote for an organization twice in one iteration. This is obviously important because, if you casting one voice credit, that's one vote for the organization, you can't then just keep using only one voice credit and still getting one vote and voting for the same organization. That would completely destroy the quadratic voting. So for every DAO, you can only vote for that DAO once in that iteration period. Otherwise, the quadratic thing doesn't make any sense. There is scope, again, for a lot of smart contract work to take into account what your previous vote was and remodel and do everything, but that wasn't within the scope of what we were doing. That's another big task, so we didn't implement that at this time. And again, you can vote for multiple organizations, right? So remember, the whole idea is it allows people to express their relative strength of their preferences over a number of different proposals or DAOs. You want to express how much you think Moloch DAO versus DAOcare versus Lao DAO or whatever. You want to express amongst all of them, your relative preference on the DAOs. Yeah, I think that's sort of the DAO rules in a.
Cool.
Should we?
Maybe it's easier to stay here and go to this section. It's quite dense with text, but I think it'll be easier to go through this than the code, and then we can go back to the code and explain it.
But quickly before we do that, I just want to check. I think that pretty much sums up the deposits contract, though. So, the deposits contract is depositing, withdrawing. As we said, with all of these logics, we have a lot of modifiers to check all of these things. So you can't withdraw if you voted. So our deposit contract will go and ask our DAO contract, have they voted? If they voted, okay, they're not allowed to withdraw yet till the next iteration. So, these guys communicate and interface, and that's why it was important to have the emergency module in case someone, hacked or got the upgrade keys from the one because they communicate. But yeah, that's pretty much this contract, and then Jason will get into the other thing. It's creating proposals, adding deposits, and yeah, that's the emergency modules. But there's not much more to it. It's quite straightforward.
Cool.
So let's get to the coolest part, and this is I'll let Jason talk you through it now. But this is the DAO incentive mechanism, and this is why this thing ticks, we think. Go for it, Jason.
Sorry, I'm losing your audio a little bit, but I think you're back. So basically, we want to. I've said this probably 20 times in this call, but we want to incentivize people to vote and to keep voting. So each user has a value called the user's vote incentive stake. You can kind of think of this as like a stake. You have a stake in the DAO, and when you vote, you basically add this stake to that value called total staked vote incentive in iteration, and that value increases every iteration, every time someone votes. So basically, you put a stake in that iteration when you cast a vote in that iteration. Then in the next iteration,
just quickly before you get there, Jason. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Just quickly to take a high level on this mechanism. The high level is that if the DAO earns $100 of interest in this iteration, basically, we want to reward everyone who's voted in this iteration with the interest. And in this way, we're incentivizing people to actively vote and rank the DAOs. And this is what we think is the most fair and coolest mechanism to actually get people to want to take part and vote in the DAO through this interest reward. So yeah, go on.
Yeah, sorry, I think I missed some of that, but yeah. Going on, basically, your sort of ratio of stake compared to the total stake in that iteration is given to you next time you vote. So you have to vote at least twice to get your reward, which is really simple, but it means people keep staying because not only do they get rewarded, but they get rewarded extra based on the voter apathy of others. So the more people that drop out of the DAO or forget to vote, the more the people who do stay in the DAO earn, which is, yeah, as I say, really powerful. I think that makes sense. John, if there's anything you want to add more details on, go for it. Otherwise, we can move to the code.
Yeah, let's chat through it on the code quickly. I think the mechanism, is such that your payout for voting last iteration. So if you voted last iteration, you'll get paid out some of the interest as an incentive, but your payout from voting last iteration is only triggered by you voting in the next iteration, which is really cool because now if you voted in the next iteration to trigger your payout from the last iteration, it means you'll have to stay in the system for a whole nother iteration. So it's like the self-fulfilling prophecy where, every iteration to receive your reward, you have to vote. And it incentivizes continuous voting throughout the system. So yeah, I think that's what I think is flipping super cool about it. So let's go on to this function over here. Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah.
Go for it, Jason.
I was just going to say, just watching time, I think the only point that we really want to get to at the end is to actually show the quadratic voting calculation. Because we spoke about that right at the beginning. It'll be nice to round that off.
Should we quickly do that now, just because it's so simple?
Yeah, I think let's not get too into the weeds with this mechanism and rather say, you can look at this code yourself. We've tried really to put as many comments as possible.
Yeah.
But for this overview, I think we've explained enough.
For sure. So I'll quickly just summarize it up. But this is the function that essentially does everything. And this function calculates, it says, did you vote last iteration? And if you voted last iteration, you will get paid out. And this function's only called when you vote in the next iteration. And it does all of the clever, cool things. So yeah, check this out. Reset uses voting credit to first vote in the iteration. So it resets the amount of credit for all their quadratic voting if it's a new iteration, and it will also pay them out. Yeah, so it's a super cool one. As you can see, it's internal. This function is called whenever you vote, but it's only sort of really triggered if it's the first time you voted in an iteration. Then all of the magic happens. Yeah, I think we're good there, hey Jason?
Yeah, totally. Let's move to the vote. Vote direct. There we go.
Go for it. Tell us what amount and square root is.
So as you can see, we don't just pass in the amount that we want to vote with. We also pass in the square root of that amount. And what that means is we have a modifier on line 430.
Quadratic correct.
Yeah, we can go to that. That basically checks that the square of the amount is correct. And the reason we prefer to do this is calculating the square of a number is much, much, much easier than calculating the square root. So you can calculate the square root offline with your powerful computer that isn't super expensive Ethereum transaction. And once you know the value, then you can submit it, which is, smart coding.
Yeah. So you can see in this require here, it just checks that the square root multiplied by the square root is equal to the amount. And you've obviously passed in the amount and the square root. And that way we know your quadratic is correct, and we know how much, we know how much to subtract from your void credits, the amount, and the square root, how much to add to the vote tally, which is, smart coding. Yeah, I mean, it's as simple as that. It's actually a great little solution. One other quick thing I'll talk about just for 2 seconds while I'm here. There's also a vote proxy function. This is something we won't get into, but there's also possible functionality to delegate your votes, to your voting power to other people. This is something that can be removed completely. It might not be what we want in the system, but it's quite cool, and it's a possibility. And yeah, that's the gist of it. One other note is another mechanism we considered instead of sort of the interest mechanism as we had was a sort of pool to get a lottery, and one of the person who's voted in the iteration will win all of the interest. But we think this is a bit... So we were going to use Chainlink's VRF, which we've integrated before, and we have the implementation commented out, essentially. It's a super cool way to do it, but we thought the other way we do it is a bit more fair, and everyone stands to benefit more. And yeah, this last function, Jason, I would say is really important. This is an external function. Anyone can call it. And one of the big things is the iteration has to have elapsed. And this just checks that the proposal deadline, which we envisage would be every 3 months, has passed by. And, now essentially what this does is once every 3 months, once the iteration has elapsed, as we said, someone can call this function, which increases the iteration, resets all the voting tallies, pays out all the incentive mechanisms to everyone, and now starts us with a fresh ranking system, which is pretty sweet. And that's the main things of the mechanism. There's lots of other cool stuff in these contracts. We could chat all night about it. Check the README. One other thing I want to just quickly show is the tests running and just passing so sweetly. I think this is really worth just showing because, I mean, it's just a pleasure to watch, to be honest. Obviously, my computer takes slow because it's trying to stream and run tests and do lots of different things at once. But yeah. It doesn't normally take this long. Sorry about that. But you can see all the tests run and pass. We also have a code coverage report, which if you look at it over here, it shows essentially what the coverages all look like. And I'll actually quickly show you this code coverage report, what it looks like. If you've never seen one, it's really cool. So if you give me a second, I'll go in and grab that. Code. Let's just let this run while you can watch it this while I find it. Code. Where did I put this? I can't find where I put this. DemocracyDAOv1. There we go. There we go. So you can see all the tests pass. That normally actually only takes about 20 seconds to run, but you know, sometimes things take longer. I'm gonna pull this up for you guys. Again, my computer's kind of tweaking out. Yeah, so you'll see on the code coverage over here for our contracts, we pretty much cover everything. There's maybe one or two slight improvements, but you know, of the pool deposits, it shows you on the code coverage report everything that's been tested over here. This modifier actually needs to be removed. This code's not even used. That's a good catch. Modifier valid interest. Anyways, we'll remove that now. But basically, this is really cool. So in the repo, you can run NPX Bidler coverage. And yeah, you can see all the tests pass, and you'll get the coverage report, which you can scroll through showing how much everything's been tested. So it's well tested. We think it's well thought out. We think it's a pretty cool mechanism. We're excited for feedback. Jason, are you there? Let me quickly add him to the stream. Oh, there we go. I can hear you again now. How's it going?
Oh, you can hear me?
Yeah, I didn't hear you for the last 5 minutes if you were speaking, unfortunately.
Yeah, geez. I was basically shouting that I've got the code coverage ready and you can just use mine.
Oh, no, dude, sorry.
Yeah.
I couldn't hear you.
Pretty cool. Our code coverage has coverage on every single thing except for the whitelist. And we added the whitelist right at the end. So
can I add your
we
screen?
don't really think the whitelist is critical, given we have all the other mechanisms for civil attack prevention.
Do you want to quickly talk about I've shared your screen. Maybe you want to quickly go on your screen and look. Oh, and show us.
Yeah. So basically here in the left margin, wait, let me make this bigger.
Good idea.
Can you guys see nicely?
Yeah, so that's way better.
In this left margin, one more, you've got how many times this line of code was run during the test. So this line of code was tested 35 times, which is really good. And, you know, preferably you want everything tested at least once. So you can see everything has been tested, except for the whitelist. So this code we added later. So this whitelist isn't active, so this doesn't run. And we aren't testing these whitelist and blacklist functions. So really, these functions are only here as super simple admin functions. In the future, you'd want to turn these simple functions into something that's governed by the DAO, and we would remove the need for an admin. So yeah, that's really all I wanted to show in the coverage report. Of course, having coverage doesn't mean there are no bugs, but if you don't have coverage, you've got a problem. So always good to check your coverage.
Yeah, that's sweet. And Jason, last thing, should we submit our submission to should we show people what a submission looks like while we add it?
Yeah, sure.
To Gitcoin.
Let's go for it.
So we're going to click submit work. You can see a bounty shows you how much it's worth. So this one's $600. And, you know, it shows you a bunch of stuff. There's 4 hours left. You can see this is our team, Democracy DAO. Myself, Jason, and Denim. Jason's on the call with me. And we had a work plan over here where we actually talked in a lot of detail about all of these ideas. We've actually had a lot of back and forth conversation with Santiago, who created this the bounty. And yeah, let's submit the work. We'll show you guys what it's like. So the project link is this bad boy over here, this repo, which is what you want to see. The payout address is, let me grab an address over here. If my MetaMask ever loads. We can take account 1. Here we go. Okay, so Gitcoin faucet. Does Gitcoin give you free ETH to submit?
Yeah, I think they do if you have 0 ETH, which is super nice of them.
Should we try that?
Yeah, I'm worried it won't work. I've seen a lot of bugs on Gitcoin. Whoops, I said that on the internet. But yeah, let's try it.
Let's try it. Okay, so
let's try it.
I'm going to try submit again. Okay, view faucet. Oh, I probably shouldn't have opened that in another tab. It's going to kill.
It looks like you have to give a comment.
Yeah,
and they're going to
that's
review it.
way. Yeah, cancel that. Let's just use good old ETH.
Yeah. If you wanted, I could do this on my laptop.
No, I got $7. Don't stress.
Yeah, plenty
for these
it's
days.
Like one
gas
transaction.
Prices, eh? Yeah, one transaction. Let's see. Okay, we just got to wait another few minutes for this to reload. Okay, there we go. This is wrong. Hopefully that will update. Hours worked. So me and you maybe did what today, Jason? Like 8 hours each? We could 6 hours each?
Yeah, maybe 6 hours.
6 hours each, so that's 12. Plus I also did maybe 6 hours on Saturday, plus maybe another 2 hours scoping it out. I'd say 20 that's a low, yeah, I mean, it's decent. 20 hours, I would say. I think it was great. I would have talked more maybe about some of the errors in the initial smart contract. So when I first started doing this and I forked Moloch, there was a lot of compiling errors. So just for that reason, I'd maybe give it a 4. It'd be nice to preface it next time that there was, you aren't working with building on code that's compiling. You have to fix errors, which is a little bit different. But no, actually, I'm going to give it 5 stars. It was a super cool hack, and Santiago was super, helpful. So let's submit this work, dude.
Cool.
Let's check if it works. Okay, submitting. Actually, quite a low participant submission rate because I saw like 10 different people were working on this challenge, unless they're all leaving it to the final
last minute.
Yeah. Confirm. 0. Amount gas fee 0. What the hang?
Wait, I don't see MetaMask. Maybe it's not showing.
Yeah, sorry. No, it came up on my second screen, but all you need to know is it says there was an error. I had this the other day as well. I had to click submit twice for it to actually work.
Yeah.
Let me try click submit again.
Yeah, no, Gitcoin's awesome, but I've noticed a few little quirks. I think if they iron out these quirks, it'll be unstoppable.
Yeah. You see, like this is wise up. This is something wrong here.
Yeah, they've there's
obviously it's failing.
That's weird. And they don't give you any options to set. I've seen previously that Gitcoin give you options to set the gas.
Doesn't look like it anymore. Action pending.
In MetaMask, there should be a way for you to set to adjust
Yeah.
it. Say edit. Edit.
Where's edit? Am I blind?
Next to gas fee.
Ah.
And let's make it fast, or at least average. Oh, wow.
They're all the same. There's something weird going on here.
Oof. Yeah.
Oof.
Okay, well, that's yeah, let's just go for that.
Am I about to get duped $2? Let's see. We'll find out. You know, I submitted one earlier today, and it only took a few seconds. I used the gas price of 1 Gwei, and it went through.
No
earlier
ways.
For a bounty. Oh. Yeah, dude, where it should show. It's not showing. If I go to my address, copy address to clipboard. Actually, let's go view here in Etherscan. Confirm. Okay, sick. It's confirmed.
Nice.
But if you go check my address, dude, I'm going to show you the spice.
Your previous transaction.
Oh no, it's not showing. Did it not submit? It's my other one. Maybe it didn't submit.
Did you do it on the testnet?
No, I don't think so.
Maybe it was on a different account.
Maybe it was on the. I don't think it was on a different account. What?
Spice.
This is hacks. We've already done this. Why is it saying let's get started? There we go. Work submitted. Let's go check this other. Okay, I guess I'll check the other one offline. That's it, dude. High five.
Peace, guys. Boom.
Boom. Boom. I think we're looking forward to some feedback on this design as well, hey?
Yeah, please. If you've listened through this whole thing, I'm sure you've got a lot of opinions, questions, feedback. You can find us on Telegram. You can find us on Twitter. You can comment in the YouTube channels. Yeah, please don't be shy. We like communicating.
What's our Telegram? Let me quickly find our Telegram.
It's telegram.me/wildcardsworld without a space.
There we go. Just chucked it in the chat for anyone who wants to get it. Awesome, guys. That's me and Jasoon's out. A nice lekker design session. Everyone stay steezy, and we'll see you all soon on the flip side with some more excellent content.